Ilhan Omar never saw this coming. Check it out.
A lot of money has been transferred from the individuals who committed this fraud. Representative Omar donated to AG Ellison.
During a recent interview, Scott Bessent broke down where the stolen money from Minnesota's massive fraud might have ended up, something Ilhan herself appeared to confirm without much hesitation.
We obviously had people who were able to donate to our campaign that were involved.
And today we're covering it all. So if you believe truth isn't partisan, hit the subscribe button and let's jump right into it.
Before I let you go, I want to ask you about this massive fraud out in Minnesota in the state welfare program. It has been under federal investigation since all the way back in 2022. The president told you, though, this week to look into Somalis who, quote, ripped off that state for billions of dollars. He said they contribute nothing. What exactly are you investigating?
Well, Margaret, to be clear, the initial fraud that was discovered by the IRS, for which I'm the acting commissioner, is discovered by IRS Criminal Investigations Unit. This was not an endogenous thing that the state of Minnesota decided we had to go in and clean up the mess for them, and this is part of the continued cleanup. A lot of money has been transferred from the individuals who committed this fraud, including those who donated to the governor, donated to Representative Omar, and donated to AG Ellison.
Now, although Tim Walz would like everyone to believe his administration is cracking down on the endless fraud schemes in his state, the reality sits elsewhere. As Bessent mentioned, the IRS, DOJ, and FBI were the ones leading the charge. When it comes to these fraudsters donating money to multiple prominent Democrats, that's true as well. And reports indicate multiple Minnesota Democrat politicians, quote, were handed over $53,000 in campaign contributions. A few returned the money, though, like Ilhan Omar in 2022, and AG Ellison, who gave the money back, quote, when the FBI surge went public. But that's just a small fraction of the billions in stolen funds. And the Treasury is currently investigating where the remaining money went. So let's take a look at what Scott had to say.
But they've been transferred to something called MBSs, and those are
mortgage-backed security. What do you mean?
Sorry.
Transferred to what?
These are money the Bureau services, and they are wire transfer organizations that are outside the regulated banking system, and that money has gone overseas. And we are tracking that both to the Middle East and to Somalia to see what the uses of that have been.
Okay, but you have no evidence of that money being used to fuel terrorism at this point, which is what some conservative writers are alleging.
That's why it's an investigation. We started it last week. We'll see where it goes. But I can tell you that, it's terrible. Representative Omar tried to downplay it, said, oh, it was very, it was very tough to know how this money should be used. Yeah. She was gaslighting the American people.
Well, we'll talk to her.
Yeah, but when you come to this country, you got to learn which side of the road to drive on. You got to learn to stop at stop signs, and you got to learn not to defraud the American people.
Now, there are a few things to unpack here. First of all, the former federal prosecutor who oversaw the Feeding Our Future cases said the fraudsters, quote, were looking to get rich, not fund overseas terrorism. And as endless reporting shows, they spent the stolen money on luxury cars, private villas, gold jewelry purchased in Dubai, first-class flights to Istanbul, and the list goes on. But there's another layer here, as some outlets are citing federal counterterrorism sources who are claiming millions of dollars in stolen funds have been sent back to Somalia, where they ultimately landed in the hands of the terror group Al-Shabaab. The same sources clarify, though, that since the money is being sent through money transfer networks, the group is ending up taking a cut, whether the transfer was intended for them or not. Again, these remain allegations at this point, and there are ongoing investigations into the matter. But right after Bessent, CBS had Ilhan Omar on the show, and true to her brand, her response leaned heavily on deflection rather than addressing the substance.
We have a lot to get to with you, but I want to pick up on where the Treasury Secretary just left off. He alleged that people who were tied to you or your campaign were involved in this broad, brazen scheme to rip off the Minnesota state welfare system. Do you want to respond to that? Do you know what he is referring to?
I really don't, and I don't think the secretary himself understands what he's referring to. We obviously had people who were able to donate to our campaign that were involved. We sent that money back a couple years ago. And actually, I was one of the first members of Congress to send a letter to the Secretary of AG asking them to look into what I thought was a reprehensible fraud that was occurring within the program.
So, in the same breath, Ilhan dismissed the secretary as uninformed while also admitting her campaign took money from individuals tied to the fraud. That contradiction is exactly why so many people take issue with her response. Now, to be fair, prosecutors aren't accusing her of committing a crime, but brushing everything off without offering a shred of evidence, context, or clarification raises some real questions. It comes across less like confidence and more like avoidance. Saying nothing would have been one thing. Saying two opposing things back to back is another. What makes this worse is that it didn't stop there, because when pressed again moments later, the contradictions became even harder to ignore.
Do you think, though, that there was a failure by the Democratic state government to police itself? This is a brazen, fraudulent activity here.
Yeah, and that is what I alluded to in my letter that I'd sent to the Secretary of AG, was to see where things were going wrong. How can this amount of money disappear fraudulently without there being alarms being set off? And it is something that, we have to continue to investigate. We have to continue to ask those questions. We do know that when the money was stopped, they did sue. The AG, Attorney General Keith Ellison, defended the department in that lawsuit. It was a judge that said it should continue, that money should continue to go out. And so this wasn't something that people were not looking at. There was always those alarms, and we will continue to understand where things might have gone wrong as these investigations continue and as these fraudsters are prosecuted and sent to jail.
Well, it's going to have impact for your community.
Again, she shifted her story mid-sentence. One moment she claimed no alarms were raised, then suddenly admitted people were already looking into it. Mind you, the record doesn't support her version. Minnesota's own judicial branch website explicitly states, quote, "Before the court could rule, the parties reached an agreement," adding, Judge Gutman never ordered the Department of Education to resume payments to Feeding Our Future in April 2021 or at any other time. They even mentioned it a third time, saying, quote, "The Department of Education voluntarily resumed making payments, and they were not ordered by the courts to do so." This undercuts the entire defense being pushed now by Ilhan and other Minnesota Democrats who are throwing out every excuse available, hoping something sticks. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on this story. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and remember, keep thinking.